Okay, I'm just gonna
Perfect.
let it run. It's okay. May I?
Yes.
Okay. And I have it on a timer to go with my speech, so they don't.
Well, you probably, no, looks like, it seems to be working just fine.
It
So,
does. Now, let me see if I know how to stop it. Let's see. Well, if we've got time, I'll let it run through.
okay. We have
Now,
another 10 minutes before I expect to see people showing up.
okay. What about Evelyn? Is she going to come on early? I thought she
I
was.
thought so,
Uh-huh.
but
I'm going to text her. Are you joining Marty and I? Where are you, Marty?
Central Kentucky.
Okay, I'm a West by God Virginian, you know.
Well, I am by lineage 50% West Virginian.
Are you? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, then you're okay. What county or what part?
Roane County
Roane,
is
okay.
where my dad's people were from.
Okay, okay. I grew up in Kanawha County in a
Mhm.
little coal mining holler that doesn't exist anymore. It's a forest now, but it was called Ward.
I don't know Ward, but
Okay.
I know War, West Virginia, but not
War, right. There is a war.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, when my brother retired out of the mines about a year and a half ago, it was the first time in 100 years that nobody
Really?
in my family was either working in the mines or laid off from working in the mines.
Wait, you said he retired only about a year and a half ago?
Yeah, my brother did.
Wow. Oh, Evelyn said, I'm on. I think he has to let me in.
Okay, let me just. I don't see how I do that. Well, let me see if I can figure out how to.
Let me see now. How can I need to stop my PowerPoint? How do I do that? End show. I got it. And stop share. Okay.
Okay, and now I think what I've got to do is take back the hosting from you, and then I think I'll be able to.
Let's see here.
There, reclaim host and admit all. Now, letting everybody join.
Hello. Everything under control in here?
Hello. Hi. Oh, I need to start my video. Hi.
Oh, there you are. Hi.
Okay.
Hi, Lindsay. Hi, T.
Hi.
Guys. Adam, I recognize you from other rural assembly stuff. Good to see you.
And I remember South Carolina
Yep.
back
Yeah.
in the olden times.
Back when we could meet in person and shake hands and stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, we're just here to help keep things running smoothly if you guys need us. Otherwise, I'm sure Marty already went through all this.
No, we'd been testing the PowerPoint, and so I was not the host and didn't see that we had a crowd lining up waiting to get in. So just have done that now. We've got the PowerPoint lined up.
Awesome.
How many, can you see how many are in the waiting room?
We're
Marty?
test showing screen.
One more. Tracy McKenna is in there now.
T, your shirt looks beautiful. That the blouse, the blues and stuff. I love it.
So, Evelyn, who is part of the panel here?
I myself am sort of the moderator and the initiator, and then Lindsay and T are our other presenters in that order, and then some questions at the end.
Okay. All right. Okay, well, if you all are okay, I'll go ahead and let the other folks in. If that.
Yeah, we technically still got 5 minutes, but you know.
Yeah, maybe we should wait the 5 minutes, I guess.
Okay.
Were you guys able to join for the main session at all today?
I was listening in. The discussion with the author Margaret, I guess, was really, really lovely. I kind of had my headphones in. I took a walk this trail near my house, and yeah, it got me thinking. So
Evelyn, I'm drawing a blank. The part of CERD that's BC.
building community workshop.
Building community, right, okay.
Yeah. Although you could just acknowledge Omar. So I think you might, he branched off from building community workshop and he now has his own studio. So it was when he was working with you, actually, it was a situation where we still had to give credit. You know what I mean? You know what I mean. So.
Marty, did you go through the quick heads up about the Derek Chauvin trial?
No, that we're expecting a verdict at any minute.
Okay.
And so that's that could change what's most uppermost in folks' minds. Right there.
Yeah. Lindsay, are you in Denver?
I am. Yes, I am.
How is it?
It's pretty good. Driving in from Green River was a little interesting last night. Coming over the Vail Pass was like a blizzard for the last 2 hours, maybe. It was rough, but it's all basically melted now. So it was really pretty, but it was also very like
Yeah. Yeah. Are you pretty comfortable driving?
I mean, I would say like okay, but certainly not. There was like some moments where it was like, oh, I don't know what I do here, and it's kind of slippery and stuff. But it was nice, to say the least, to get to the hotel last night and feel like settled and not have to drive in it. And so I think it might snow tomorrow, but for the most part, it's okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. No, this is gonna be fun.
Okay. I agree.
Well, we're at the 2-minute mark. We will turn off our cameras, I suppose, and get out of your way.
Okay. Sounds great.
Have a great session.
Cool. I will.
Let us know if you need anything.
I'll let folks in about 30 seconds or so.
And you guys are good with your presentation slides? You guys practice that?
Yeah, and if you want to just holler to make sure I know to make you the host at that moment to do your slides, just holler out.
Hello, everyone. We are seeing some faces and names pop up on the screen as people come into this breakout session. Happy Tuesday. We are gonna give it a few minutes as people join. I'm Evelyn, and I will do introductions and everything in just another 30 seconds or so to make sure that everyone who's on this session that wants to be is. Hope you guys got a chance to check out the rest of the summit earlier today. And thanks for joining us. I know it's past 5 o'clock if you're on the East Coast, so all that extra time is very much appreciated. And then just so everyone knows, this session is going to be recorded. So if you would not like to have your face appear on the screen, just turn your video off. But it will be recorded and shared afterwards. All right. So with no further ado, welcome to Design to Reclaim Rural America. This is about what design visioning can do for your town. My name is Evelyn Immonen. I'm from the Housing Assistance Council and with the Citizens Institute on Rural Design. And I'm so excited that you guys could join us for this breakout session for Rural Assembly Everywhere. A bit about the Housing Assistance Council. We are a national nonprofit that advocates for both single and multifamily affordable homes and promotes home ownership for low-income rural families. We have a research division, technical assistance and training division, and loan fund. And our work for the last 50 years has been focused on high needs areas such as Indian Country, the Mississippi Delta, farm workers, the Southern Border Colonias, and Appalachia. I'm also coming to you all through the Citizens Institute on Rural Design, which is an initiative of the National Endowment for the Arts in partnership with HAC. We are focused on communities of 50,000 or less, and our goal is to enhance the quality of life and economic viability of America, of rural America, through planning, design, and creative placemaking. So we are intended to power local communities, and you'll hear a little bit more about our work doing that with Mount Zion later in the presentation. So before I get in, I want to give a huge thank you to the Rural Assembly and the Center for Rural Strategies. Thank you, Whitney, Adam, Marty, Tyler, everyone who's been working to set this up. We really appreciate the platform. I also am calling you in today from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And as a descendant of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa Indians, I think that it's really important to take a second and acknowledge that I'm calling in today from the original lands of the Osage Nation, and that they have contributed to the stewardship, and I'd like to honor the land that I am on and that I call home right now as their Aboriginal land. But I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, and I have a lot of fond memories of all sorts of rural places. Both of my parents are from small towns. One of the memories I have from a kid that brings us to today's session about design is traveling to Falling Water, which is an architectural exhibit. And it's a home that was built by the architect Frank Lloyd Wright in the forests of southwestern Pennsylvania. And I remember on this field trip, walking through this home that's built over a waterfall in this forest and getting a chance to think for the first time, somebody designed this, somebody carefully thought through exactly how this home would work with its landscape and would be a work of art. And so I thought it would be a fun icebreaker for people if you want to go into the comments and share a little bit about where you're from and share and introduce yourself. And maybe, do you have a memory of a piece of architecture or a building that really moved you or that you thought was beautiful, like my experience with Falling Water? So finally, what is today's session going to be about? This is designed to reclaim rural America. And I think that today we're going to get a chance to understand how design thinking can help see a new vision for a town. We're going to generate ideas for how artists, planners, and citizens can collaborate on a public space. And we're going to listen to stories of community past and present. So if that sounds exciting to you all, come along for the ride. And if you have any questions at any time, please feel free to comment them in the chat. And I will try to moderate them, or the speakers can respond to them themselves. So the first speaker today, I'm going to turn it over to Lindsay Briseno. She is from Green River, Utah, and I will let her introduce herself and get right to it.
Hi, I'm happy to be here. Yes, like Evelyn said, my name is Lindsay Briseno, and I currently am in Green River, Utah, a tiny little town close to southeastern area. We're pretty close to Moab, if people know that. It's a little bit larger, about 3 hours away from Salt Lake City. So that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of where we are. Evelyn, do you want me to share my screen? I'm sorry.
I can bring it up if you'd like, either way.
I'll do it. That way I can just advance the slides. If that's a little bit easier. Okay, just give me
Want to make sure we have a.
Okay. Whoop. Sorry. Okay.
That's
Hopefully
coming.
you guys can see that.
Great.
So yeah, the organization I work for is Epicenter, like I said, in Green River, Utah, and this is a really great capture of our town. It has a lot of great, unique geological features, I think, but it also is in kind of the middle of nowhere, which I have come to really enjoy. And so I kind of wanted to give a little bit of background of the history of the work that Epicenter has done, with a focus on some design initiatives, and then go into a little bit of our current initiative, which is housing, and how all of this has sort of led up to the largest project to date, which is a housing development. So Green River, like most small towns, has seen a lot of booms and busts. There's been a couple bigger booms with the uranium mining and also a missile base here. But one thing that we're known for is resiliency and watermelons. So this is an actual size watermelon float in our town that we have at the parade at Melon Days every year. And like most towns that you guys are probably familiar with, there's a lot of blight in our community. And so it's been one of the focuses of Epicenter's past to bolster the history that is embedded in this community, but also how do we move to the future and give residents an opportunity to stay here. And so, like I said, this town is known for its beauty, but it is a town of 952, and we are right on off of the interstate of I-70. The closest towns are about an hour away. We do have a medical clinic and a grocery and things like that. So there are services within our town, which actually make it unique. Because of the rural setting, it actually allows us to provide more amenities like that for ourselves This is a good shot of the Amtrak that kind of rolls through, that kind of drops people off and picks people up. So this is our office. This was the first project that the co-founders of Epicenter did. It was an old, I think about over 100 years old, and they got a grant from USDA to renovate this building for about $100,000. And that's currently where we are. It's right off of Broadway, which is probably considered one of the main thoroughfares in Green River. And one thing I wanted to kind of talk about through the history of Epicenter and our evolution in Green River is just some of the initiatives that have taken place. So one thing that they started way back when is Destination Green River. And really this was the idea that there are opportunities in Green River. We just really need to take advantage of them. And how do you do that with the community? And Maria Sykes, who is still part of Epicenter, one of the founders, says that we're not here to save the community. We're just here to use the resources. And how do we bolster that to create advancements and opportunities? So one of the initial things was just to sort of pay attention to and create pamphlets for some of the geological, like sort of sightseeing stuff nearby, to show that Green River could be a hub, unlike Moab or some of these larger tourist attractions. And then another thing that was called to attention was, if we want people to visit the town, how do we clean up the town? And so GRIT was formed with community initiative, and to just basically, they pick a project a year. You can see some of the examples to clean up the neighborhood. And then this is one of the coolest ones, is the Green River newspaper. This was kind of a love story to the town, as described to me. It's really just kind of a way to pay homage to what's here. And this is a locally distributed newspaper that locals did. And so, and it was really just to tell stories of the place. People loved it. It was a huge success. I think they ran out of copies. They may have to reprint them, I'm not sure. And then the success of that led to the Green River magazine. And then this is just like sort of a more robust history of Green River. And really what some of these initiatives were, used to do was to amplify the voices that were part of the community already, what existing community members can speak to. How do you use design to tell those stories, which is so important in a rural space, because constantly you're asked, why Green River? Why do you live in these small towns? And sometimes the residents say that too. The younger kids coming up are like, oh, I can't wait to move on or whatever. But I think the important is to, first of all, document the history, but also get people excited about what's here. And that's a huge factor in how we've been able, and Epicenter before me has been successful. This is Green River was also a really fun project they did, where they took local items and told the stories of it, like spoons and knives and things like that. And they were able to tie a story to an object and kind of and tell that at the John Wesley Powell Museum. And so instead of bringing an exhibit into town, they were able to showcase local items. Another sort of tier of Epicenter's work is downtown development. One thing they found was that people, there's two big hubs of gas stations on either side of town, and the main street connects them. So what they were trying to do is they found that people would stop at the gas stations and they weren't kind of coming into town to recognize some of the amenities that we had. So the idea was to leave little breadcrumbs to try and get people to slowly see, like, oh, well, what's kind of there? Let's see what this town is really about. And one of the most successful, one of my favorite projects is the Welcome to Green River sign that artist Lisa Ward did. I believe she took some of the initial ideas for some of the sketches from high school students in town. And at night, it looks exactly what it's supposed to do. It's this really beautiful neon sign, and people do pay attention. And I think the locals really bought into this idea about how do we get people into town, and how do we represent our city in a way that's unique and interesting. And one way they did that was really, really well done design. Another one of my favorites, instead of loneliness, I feel loveliness, kind of a mantra in rural America, I think. So these are the 2 neon projects they did quite a few years ago, maybe 5 or 6. And it kind of represents some of the neon that already exist in town. So they're playing off some of the initial design initiatives that were there. And then they did some community charrettes based off of like how to basically amplify some local businesses. And you can see our founder back here, if you can see my mouse, one of our co-founders, Maria Sykes, kind of helping with some of the charrette efforts to talk about Broadway and Maine and how do you cultivate new businesses and what do you do with some of the blight that's existing. So they held some charrettes, had some moving parts and stuff like that is really successful with people, just sort of talking about design in a way that's really tangible, I think is really important. And so they were able to use that to basically develop this document, Waypoint. And really this is an idea, it's like a playbook almost, or a toolkit, as a way to say, okay, we have these pockets in this town, how do we either create a business, or do we clean this up, or how do we use what we already given, and how do we slowly, incrementally come to a larger, more communal space. One of the ideas was taking one of the lots available and doing little food trucks, gathering people in that spot, making them aware that it exists really, and then actually turning that could potentially turn into a restaurant. And things like ways to use spaces that were either next to an abandoned building or some blight and clean it up to be able to provide a space for people to hang out and actually really create opportunities for people to have new successful businesses. And this is an example of one. Like I said, this is our office and this is a lot right next to it. They were able to clean this up for about, I think, $900. And this is a local piece by an artist called a labyrinth that you kind of walk through and meander. And they cleaned this site up and were able to put an art piece. So it's a really good example of how we were able to utilize working with an existing owner, cleaning up, say, hey, we'll do the work. We're going to put this in. And it's actually really popular. We see people all the time kind of walking by and being like, oh, we were just at this thing next door. What's that about? So we get a lot of traffic kind of coming into the office because of it's really fun. And this is a field guide to Green River. This was a really another kind of cool document. And this is one that we kind of hand out to people who are curious about the town. This is less local based, like local looking and more like outward looking for people who come through as a way to basically say this is the history of the town, and because we get a lot of those questions too. So the one thing I know the most about is the housing. So Green River is really unique because we're not having a huge growth in population, but the existing housing stock is so old that we could basically replace half of it and still need units. So this is our tiny little town. This is kind of really just as a way to show kind of the town in general. This is the main street right here. Here's our river. So you can see these clusters of housing kind of embodied, and you can see some of the trailer parks down here at the bottom. And then we have a city park, and some of the newer homes are built around there. So this is kind of a snapshot of some of the existing quality of homes. We used, I believe, USDA's grading of homes to sort of talk about how they did a windshield study, basically trying to use the anecdotal information that they knew and trying to turn that into hard data so that we could get some of the funders to pay attention. And one way we were able to do that was to grade the existing housing units. So there's 476 total. And as you can see, like 47%, just under 50 are in need of dire repair, I would say. And a lot of that total, majority is pre-1976 trailers. And so one of the things that we're struggling with is that idea of how do you work on the existing housing stock, but also provide new homes and get people into equitable spaces. And so one thing that we also did was we tried to take that initial data about what needed to be repaired and tried to see who lived there. Is it a rental? Is it owner occupied? Is it a mobile home, or is it vacant? That way we could categorize the priority. So if it was an owner occupied, we could start to use some of that data to say, okay, here's some funding sources for you. If it's a rental, then we knew to go after the owner and say, okay, now we know who the owner is. Do you own 5 homes? Could you repair all 5 at once, or things like that? So it was important for us to take stock of the people who were there. And so using that information, this sort of initial study, one of the things Epicenter was really conscious of was understanding the scale and capacity of the organization. And so understanding the need, but also saying, okay, well, we can't tackle all of this on our own. So how about we start with a prototype home? And that's where the Frontier House started. This is actually where I live currently, which is kind of fun. So it's a little 700 square foot house. And actually, I'll just kind of show you the front. And so this idea, this prototype was developed with the idea that, first of all, we're not experimenting on anybody that, that we could potentially be renting from us. There are some new sort of technologies put into the home, but it's actually fairly simple construction. The HVAC system is fairly new, I guess, to the community. But it was really the idea that this could replace some of the homes, mostly the trailers in town. So how do we build this for cheaper, but still provide quality materials and make those utility costs really low? Because utilities in the desert really are a lot of AC and some heat in the winter. It doesn't get too cold, but just kind of like keeping that in mind when we're designing homes. And so you kind of see the simplicity of the inside. I know that they were on quite a pinch and budget to design this home, but trying to make it as practical as possible as well. And this looks way cleaner than it does now that I live there. But you can see some of the concepts that we've taken, and this was actually the inspiration for this newer development, which I'll talk about here in a second. So whenever I got there, I'm a Rose Fellow, so I arrived 2.5 years ago. And one thing that so I was tasked with, like, okay, we're ready to take this new step. What do we do? And I think for me, that initial first step was just to understand what the community thought about when they thought about housing. And so we had this housing open house probably the first few months I was there. And really it was just a way to say to our residents, hey, we're thinking about doing this really big thing, but we want you on board. How do we give you the tools and the language to tell us what you need? Because a lot of architects and designers can sometimes use flowery, big language to talk about things that people experience every day, especially with a house. Everyone can design a home. Everyone's lived in a home. It's not unique. It's not a unique experience. Even in an apartment, those experiences count. Everything counts towards, amplifying what equitable space means to residents. And so what we did was a fairly simplistic kind of gauge of what people wanted. And so, like I said, we tried to give people language that they could tell us back to ourselves. So one of the first ones we did was basically said, like, what do you want to see in a rental home? Do you want it to be a row house, a duplex, an apartment, a townhome? And then trying to provide images that sort of bolster those ideas so that they knew what we were talking about, which is kind of fun because, you know, sometimes we come in and we're like, well, don't you want a row house or a, you know, a split level? And people are like, what? You know, I just want a place to live. And so if you can kind of give some examples, and then also just like within each category, that is such a large statement when you say, I want to live in an apartment. What does that look like? But this is what we try to do, is just like walk people through this idea of these different terminologies, and try and gauge their interest in what they wanted. And so all of that led to our biggest project to date, which is kind of tiny looking. It's 10 single family homes, 5 rental and 5 owner occupied. And you can see that these are the 5 rental homes. But what we tried to do is pay attention to the vernacular, try to pay attention to the context, not get very dense, and also provide a little park space back up in here. And we have some AmeriCorps on board who've done a really wonderful job of pulling that community in and getting a bunch of feedback for that guy too. And I could do a whole presentation on the work they've done over there, because it's just really outstanding. And so, you know, one thing that we've been trying to use all this design for is basically to say, we're not trying to do anything too flashy. We're not trying to do anything that's too outside of the realm of what Green River residents really want, and what they deserve. And that's what we're trying to provide. So the hope is that some people in this rental, which we're working on now, hopefully we'll break ground here in the next month or so, is that they are gonna go through a homeowner training. And if we could get a couple of these renters to come over here on this phase and end up buying one of these homes, then that would be the ultimate goal. Because right now, like I said, the housing stock is so low, and that missing middle that people talk about, you know, it's really hard. Even in Green River, where housing, it's rare that a house sells for more than 100,000. I feel like we've had a couple of those recently, but as far as we're concerned, you know, that range is still it's really tough and really hard to, it's not as attainable as you would imagine it to be. So like, kind of in conclusion, I like to think that design is iterative. When I got to Green River and started working for Epicenter, I didn't know any of this. And I was kind of floored by the work they had done previously. And to be able to walk into a community and have all of this design language and narrative already in place to build essentially a new community, a new development off of, was really powerful. And in a small town, you can't just, Epicenter would have walked them out or kicked them out maybe, if they would have walked in and said, hey, we're about to do a 10-unit development. You know, that would have been crazy. And so to me, the idea that design is iterative, because you have to build that language over time, has been really important to the work that we continue to do. And also, storytelling is powerful. I tell people all the time, but we would have never gotten this development even off the ground if our story wasn't sufficient enough for people to pay attention to. And I think Epicenter, like I said, I'll praise the Marias especially and the work that they've been able to do continuously, because the story of Green River, you really do need longevity, you need iterative design, you need all of that for people to buy in. And the only reason our development is off the ground is because people have bought into the story of Green River and what we're trying to do. It's helped us get funding, it's helped us get contacts and everything. And so, yeah, that's just kind of, hopefully I didn't go over, I'm not sure if I did, but that's just the story of Green River. And I love it so much. And I think that this development is going to help tremendously. It's going to be a big impact for our community. And yeah, and I think that for me, walking into a community like this as an architect, it's humbling. And also just, it's been a really great opportunity for me to use design language, I think in a new, interesting way. So yeah, that is a little bit about Green River and Epicenter and myself.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lindsay. I'm gonna suggest as we transition to T's presentation, if you want to sort of do the behind the scenes, the rural strategies people who are on this call, giving the host over. But maybe in the meantime, there are a few questions in the chat for you, Lindsay.
Sure.
If you wanted to take a look. One is about homeowner associations.
Will the neighborhoods have, is that the question about some tiny homes? We did look into that. We haven't quite flushed it out. We knew that a community land trust could potentially be within the wheelhouse of the homeowner, but it got a little complicated when we added the rental properties. Because we own all of the land, it got a little tricky, and I feel like because we're a little novice in the matter, it was a little bit outside of our wheelhouse. We would like to have some sort of revolving conversation with our residents. We don't know what that looks like, and the homeowners, for instance, but as far as what we're trying to put in place now, it's really just design guidelines to make sure that the homes that the owners build either come through us or they have a certain design standard attached to them, so that we can kind of keep it all within the same context in vernacular. So that's about as far as we've gone, but we did initially look at CLTs, but like I said, we haven't quite got to the point where we can figure it out completely. So this next question, local buy-in, especially local buy-in. Local buy-in, Green River's interesting. I think at first, the co-founders probably had a little bit of work to do to sort of make sure that people took them seriously, kind of in the capacity that we're not just here to change everything. And I honestly think just longevity has really helped with some of that local buy-in. As far as the government, most of the time City Council has been really, really supportive. We worked with them to get that land donated, so that's been a really wonderful partnership. And for the most part, they're really receptive of what we're trying to do. I think before we said we were going to do housing, Epicenter certainly tried to get the city to take it on as kind of like, how do we help you do this? We don't want to be the people. How do we help you? And I think from their perspective, it was they felt a little overwhelmed by it. So kind of proving that, we were trying to do it right. We were trying to do it in a way that was using those local voices and not do anything that was really outside of the realm of the community. Has really just kind of bolstered those relationships. And I think I'm just reading the question again. Hopefully I answered that. I think longevity, honestly, and honestly, like relationships, you just know everybody. I mean, you see everyone every day, everywhere. I mean, you cannot run from the decisions or the designs you do. People, I mean, I think that's the caveat of a small town, is that you make these decisions and you better make sure that it's the right one, because people know exactly who you are. People know Epicenter and they know Maria and Steph, like the two sort of our dominant kind of employees who've been there the longest. They know Epicenter, but they certainly know the people involved.
So sort of both trust and a bit of a cautionary or unique working environment.
Absolutely, yes.
Awesome. Well, we will have time for more questions for Lindsay later on if you all stick around. But T, are you on the line? How are we doing with?
Me unmute, and I'll attempt to share my screen.
Awesome. And I'll let you introduce yourself, but I also just want to say thank you so much for joining us. ever since we met a few years ago at that summit, you've just been such a light anytime I get on a call with you, and I'm so glad that you agreed to share your story today.
Okay, thank you so much for inviting me. I too live in a small town in southeastern Ohio, and I wish to share the story of a building that we're attempting to keep from being met by the wrecking ball and turned into a plaque like so many Black architectural icons throughout America have experienced. Let me start my restoring a beacon of light, and that's what it was. In 1872, a small group of Christian-minded folks gathered in the home of Joseph and Henrietta Miller to hold services. It was the first organized under the Eastern Union Association, which is a Baptist church organization. Moving to 76, the congregation grew, and a frame church was built on Lancaster Street by Blacks with financial support from the white community, and that gentleman, Reverend Joseph Wilson, was the pastor at the time. Around 1902, a building fund was started with the help of prominent business persons, Edward and Martha Berry, owners of the famous Berry Hotel. They donated the land on which the church was built, and ground was broken in 1905, and services were held in the basement the following September. Probably the Berrys were the entrepreneurs and probably the most well-heeled Blacks, we might say, of that time. So in 1909, the building was formally dedicated as the Mount Zion Baptist Church, or now on the National Register. Here you see an early Mount Zion choir. Cab Calloway Band played for Ohio University, probably the first university built in the southeastern region in 1804. They have a huge presence here in Athens, and the band, I believe, played for one of their dances that year. In the 40s and 50s, the church thrived under numerous leaders, and here is an early congregation with another pastor, William Strickland. And here's a picture of an annual homecoming that occurred in 1961, standing in front of the magnificent edifice. 74, as the congregation aged, membership dwindled in the years that followed until Dr. Francine Childs joined the faculty at Ohio State University and involved students in forming a choir known as the Mount Zion Gospel Voices of Faith. Here they are in the mid-80s. Later, they became the Ohio University Gospel Voices of Faith and appeared throughout the country in contests and concerts. I've been told that many people just drove up outside the church who weren't members and sat outside to listen to that choir sing. Enter 2000, and over the next 20 years, the congregation dwindled again and the building fell into decline, as you can see here with the mold, the peeling tin ceiling, and other kinds of things. However, in 2013, the Mount Zion Baptist Church Preservation Society Board of Directors were formed. In 2018, they put on a new roof at the cost of about 80 grand. And in 2019, started community outreach to the stakeholders within the community and around the surrounding community. And some of the first ones, of course, where did we go? To Ohio University, and enlisted these wonderful interns here from the Journalism, Media Arts, and Communication Studies Department. They're visiting here a historical Black college in West Virginia, where Katherine Johnson, the NASA woman, attended school and graduated in 41. That's West Virginia State University now. And they were pretty impressed with being on that campus and seeing all of the fraternity landmarks, et cetera, that were set around the school. They also, in addition to sending out news releases and starting a social media presence for us, designed a logo. And most brilliantly, where did they go? To one of the windows in the church. There are about 14 to 18 windows in this church, and they picked up one of them and made a logo for what we thought we would like the church to become as a cultural center. But they infused that design into an already existing logo for the Preservation Society, which was the church with the steeple and a moon around it, and blended the logos with both. So if and when we become this Black Cultural Center, we will use that logo, but it will also bond us together. We also went to the business school, and these young people, was a senior class, did some incredible research, not only with alums, but with current students and some of the people uptown, the entrepreneurs, small businesses, other churches, et cetera, to see what would they like this building to become. And of course, their vision was a multi-use space for them where they'd go and hang out, okay? The other, they found out that most people ask for soul food in this community. So realizing that our kitchen was not the type that could run a restaurant, they said, okay, well, you should have a catering service. You should have a co-working space, and the sanctuary should be an event venue. Their executive summary was 39 pages. They had a financial plan, who our competition was going to be, marketing forecast, and even where we could borrow money they did an incredible job, those young people. And of course, we went to the College of Fine Arts. There we had designers, graphic designers, other social media, and even picked up students who were willing to do landscaping and help to keep the grounds clear. The Heritage Square is a concept that we pitched to the city, and this logo helped us to get that pitch to them. And I'll tell you more about that later. We also had community volunteers. As you can see here, it's a high school student and one of our volunteer grant writers, and other students on the bottom there, even an international students who helped us during our COVID response. We gave out gift certificates to international students who were caught here for the summer in a hard place, unable to work, their internships given up, unable to go home. We provided them with $25 gift certificates to small businesses where they could buy food, et cetera, and some of their supplies. Then our grants thing kicked in from federal, regional, state, and private stakeholders. We received some grants. The first one we received was from CERD, which I'll chronicle for you later. And also locally from the state, we received the Ohio History Connection. We also received from the region an Appalachian Fund Network in grant, and from our private, the Helen Horn Fund. Let's take the History Connection first, because that's what we needed. We put out a bid, and Hardlines Design Company, which is run by this marvelous woman here, Charissa Durst, turned in just recently a final 80-page report of our existing conditions, an investigation in which took them about a month. Here you see her. This is the basement, and you can see kind of the condition of the basement. There is a water problem there. There's a hole. You also see them in the sanctuary doing their thing in terms of assessing exactly what and how much. And here, the Helen Horn Fund. This is our probably greatest assets, are these windows, which have been estimated between $500,000 and priceless. The Helen Horn Fund will help us board up these windows with plywood to keep them intact and in place when some of the actual industrialization and remodeling of rehabilitation of building occurs. And we have a group of artists lined up to paint on those plywoods, hopefully the history of the church, so that we will actually have a museum outside that people can walk and see. We have a variety of artists, a photographer who does some great stuff in Cleveland. One of our board members is also an artist. And of course, we'll probably go to the art school, to fine arts too, and see if we can't pull some students together to put some designs on some of that plywood. There are, as I said, these are just a few of the windows. That rose window in the center is an incredible one. From our regional, we pitched Black Wall Street, Athens County, to take a look at all of the buildings that have been destroyed that were associated with the Black community. Their college, the Berry Hotel, which was torn down in '74. And here you see a talented group of young people, the UFC cinematographer there, musicians, curriculum specialists, actor, graphic person, public relations, and of course we have our consultants there, our historians, and the lady in the bottom with the glasses, I think she is the 4th or 5th generation of attendees of that church. And in the top, we have a media arts professor who retired 1 month, and we had her in on our board by the next month. You cannot stop. And she has developed a film actually regarding Parkinson's disease. And so we hope to put together a film to present our story to the community as we begin to launch our capital campaign. But what took us there was the CERD. They culminated really all of the information that we had gotten from our other stakeholders and put it together in a design. We were selected as a partner community to work with them during that period. Here is their first visit inside the church, and one of the gentlemen taking a picture. Of course, they also helped us put together charrettes, workshops of people within the community in terms of envisioning and designing exactly what they felt the church could become once it is restored, and also pulling from the other stakeholders who had helped us in terms of the students from the different design schools. They also went into our surrounding communities of Stewart and Tablertown to visit sites where Blacks and Indigenous people lived who attended that particular church, to get a feeling of exactly how and what they would think about in terms of the design for that particular piece of property. And ta-da, this is the magnificent piece that they came up with. The head architect was a gentleman named Omar Hakim. And as you can see here, our bell tower, we're known as the beacon of light. We hope to put a light back in that bell tower. On the first floor would be history exhibits, gallery, and also a performance arts space, with the basement being a computer lab, and the next door parsonage as a possible restaurant eventually. Behind the church is the Berry Mansion, the gentleman that gave us the land. That was his domain. Right now, a fraternity is living in it. Hopefully, it will stay intact until we can get money to actually purchase it. And here's the grand scheme. Phase 1, interior rehabilitation. The first phase of the master plan, as designed by Omar and CERD, will focus on the interior rehabilitation of the building in order to offer a safe, reliable, and diverse community programming. The main sanctuary, as I said, would be a stage for many kinds of activities. The basements would be retrofitted as a digital learning and teaching space equipped with computers, desks, library space, etc. Phase 2, the adjacent expansion, would be to have a facility there where we could actually have a soul food sit-down restaurant and also emerge out into the ground grass, which would connect the two. And above, we could have a rental space along with the Mount Zion having their offices there. And should we already have a couple of tenants that we know that we'll go after if we can get to that phase. Phase 3, of course, would be using the money generated from the other buildings. The Preservation Society would invest in trying to acquire the Berry House in order to properly honor the legacy of the church's original benefactor. The first floor would become a permanent historical exhibit of Mount Zion's Church, local Black Appalachian community artifacts, and be the center also for the Historical Society. And of course, the upstairs bedrooms will be used as accommodations for visiting guests and performing artists, and rooms actually to rent for community members and other visitors. So this was our grand reimagining of that corner. All of this land was owned, as I said before, by Mr. Berry, who owned the Berry Hotel. Now, in 2021, bringing us up to date, Mount Zion begins a capital campaign plan, which we hope to maybe launch next year. And here are some of the rural entrepreneurs and small businesses that are assisting Mount Zion in this re-envisioning of the church. And I'll tell you some of the things that they are doing here. Passion Works has a Black Lives Matter sign that they sell. We get 20% of that profit. Jackie O's partnered with a brewery company in Austin, Texas, and introduced Black is Beautiful beer in last August, to which 100% of their profits goes to 3 organizations. Mount Zion Baptist Church is one of them. And that first month sale, we received $4,000 from the sale of that 10.9% malt liquor. It's a heavy one. Recently, as a matter of fact, today, I picked up a $700 check from the tip jar of the Court Street Coffee. And the other is the Kindred Market, who introduced a Common Sense program for which every Saturday, some nonprofit organization gets 1 cent of every dollar from Saturday sale. So these have been some of our community stakeholders who are on board and wish to see Mount Zion actually also raise this to a beautiful edifice and iconic structure within the community. And we hope to do that. As I said, we will hopefully launch our capital campaign next year, which is the year of the bar. The bar, a semi-annual celebration, brings back to town between 2,000 to 4,000 Black alumni, bar for Black alumni reunion. So this will be a key audience that we hope to introduce our story to. If we have our movie made by then, we've asked the Ford Foundation Just Films for extra funds to complete that movie this summer. That's it. Thank you so much. Visit us when you have time.
Thank you so much, T. That was a lot of information. And there's lots of comments in support on the chat. So anyone who has any questions for either of our presenters can go ahead and ask them. I have a few questions. Getting started with you, T. I think that thinking about Mount Zion in Athens in southeastern Ohio, one stereotype of rural America is that it's overwhelmingly white. And one of the things that I love about Mount Zion's story is that it's a counter narrative to that. So I was wondering if you had any interesting reactions that you get when you share the story of both a Black community and an Appalachian community.
Okay, I am so glad you asked me that, because you know that's something as an academic that I've already had to address. And I did in a book called Generation to Generation, which was edited by Wendy Leeds Horowitz. And if you will allow me to read from that, a literary scholar and poet by the name of, what's his name? Frank X. Walker, who's, I believe, is a professor now at the University of Kentucky, but he coined the term Afro-Lachian, okay, back in the early 2000s, to identify a population that is often overlooked in the discourse on Appalachia. And that's AFF, Afro-Lachian, instead of Appalachian, okay? This term does not ascribe to Toynbee's review of the mountain folk he found in the Cumberlands. He distinctly described them as resembling the hairy Ainu. And in popular culture, those emanating from the region were known as rednecks emanating from that region, and they mirror the image of an old show, so you know this was written some time ago because I referred to the Beverly Hillbillies, okay, as one of the icons of Appalachia, along with the country singer Loretta Lynn, who in the mind of many Americans represent the quintessential offspring of this industrial class. And yet many women of color from the coal field and hollers of West Virginia and Kentucky grew up in the milieu of coal dust, hog raising, planting and digging, and an all-encompassing church socialization, which is what Mount Zion was. It was an all-encompassing socialization for Blacks and the indigenous population here in Athens during that time, because Athens is on the corridor of the Underground Railroad. So many people came through here, some stayed, others kept on the railroad onto through to Cleveland. We were, as I was stated, by the name of this article that I wrote is called, I Too Am a Coal Miner's Daughter. Okay. And I identified myself in hillbilly land. That, you know, academics always have a colon and something else. So that was the colon and something else. So we were the daughters of fathers who, along with other Blacks and immigrants, were assigned the most hazardous underground digging positions. The more desirable outside machine operators or motorman jobs were reserved for American-born whites. Now, Booker T. Washington spoke of his experience, saying that work in the coal mines, he said, I always dreaded work in the coal mines. There was always the danger of either being blown up by a permanent explosive of powder or being crushed to death by falling slate. And I end the quote from generation to generation. But that was kind of the scenario that I wanted to present at that time, to say, look, I too came out of the coal mines, and I did, in a little holler. That little holler in Ward, West Virginia is no longer exists. It's a big forest right now. So thank you for asking me that question, Evelyn.
Yeah, and certainly from the area, born and raised, I definitely appreciate that perspective. On the flip side, I wanted to take a second going back to Lindsay and ask a question relating to you actually coming into Green River as an outsider. So you were a Rose Fellow, and I think when we talk about architecture and design in the world of the people that, you know, made the designs in Mount Zion as well, there's a bit of a lack of interest sometimes in rural areas. I mean, it's often called urban studies, right? So would you say that architects, from what you've seen, are interested in rural areas? And do you think that there's been any shift in attitudes towards that in recent years?
Yeah, I think whenever you go, I'm just speaking as someone who is an architect and has been trained through that, like in school, I think that there's a tendency to try and go after something that's flashy, and maybe a little bit more attainable in a sort of urban setting, because I think that is, you know, we're sort of told that that's like the you know, Starkitect kind of mentality. I have seen a shift, and maybe it's because I'm in this space and I didn't know that there was this large community of rural advocates really pushing the agenda to have more conversations around what rural design and rural development look like. So for me, I feel like there's a shift happening. I think there's, especially with COVID, I think there's been a bit of an exodus from urban places to some rural spots, and maybe that's why the conversation keeps coming up. But I think from my perspective, yeah, the community, and before I came to Green River, I was in Dallas working on affordable housing projects. There was no conversation around rural. And I mean, I understand that, like, I understand like why pay attention to these smaller towns if you're in a larger city, you have enough to tackle. But density doesn't always equal impact. And I think for me, I don't know, I was kind of blown away going to Green River and just understanding that we're building 10 homes, but it could be this, it's like almost the equivalent impact of building, 400 units in a metropolitan. And I think that there needs to be more conversation for architects and designers to understand that, just because you choose to live in a small space doesn't mean that you don't deserve great design. And I think for us, we really take that to heart. Just because we're only serving 5 families doesn't mean that we're not going to try our hardest to make it the best product that we possibly can. And I think in the Rose Fellow world, there's been a bit of an initiative. I was one of 2 when I first came into the program, and I've since graduated essentially, but below me, that cohort has 4. And so I think for just in that shift, I think has been significant. And I do think that it's worth a conversation. Whenever we spoke to people who were giving us money from HUD and home funds and things like that, everyone we talked to was in Salt Lake City and an urban environment. And they were like, oh, this is really cool. Things are happening in rural space. And so sometimes we're a little bit gut checked. We're like, oh, well, I thought the conversation was shifting. But I think it's important for us to just continue to highlight the work that we're doing outside of the rural context. Like gatherings like Rural Assembly are so wonderful because you're like pulling ideas together in the rural space, and then you can kind of go invade these urban conversations, which we do often. Say, oh, hey, look, we're doing cool stuff too, and they're like, oh yeah, you're right. So I think from my perspective, it seems to be shifting, but I certainly have been forever changed by this, and I think I can't see myself working in a hyper urban space anymore. But we'll see how that works. And I'm trying to get to continue to serve rural environments in the future.
Yeah, thank you. And another question on that is about then not just your relationship with the outside architecture world, but rural communities' relationship with the architecture world. So do rural folks often feel intimidated in your experience by different design concepts, or what does it take community members with maybe no background to be able to engage in with experts like yourself?
Yeah, I think, and I'll speak from a housing perspective. I think for me specifically, it's just when we did the housing open house, sort of using language that was kind of like, what's your favorite house in town? What is your favorite space? What did you really love about your kitchen? Things like that. I mean, and for us as designers and architects, our job is to be able to listen to that information and turn it into a design. That's always been what architecture is, and that's always been what design is, to be able to hear stories and concepts and turn it into a tangible thing. And so for me, in my experience, talking to community members has really just been, how do you just have a genuine conversation and understand the need for the community? And right off the bat, we just said, well, what do you need? And, what jumped out to us was, I just want a safe space. I want an accessible space. There was literally, and there still are none, accessible rental units in Green River. So we're changing that narrative. So that's been a huge deal. And so I think walking into a rural space, I do think, I think, certainly you can't have a savior's mentality, because especially our community will see right through that. And they're like, you don't know what's best for us. And so, I think just having those conversations initially and being able to use professionals and in the design industry to be able to use that as a way to make it tangible and anecdotal. All that anecdotal information really is valuable. It's invaluable to the design process.
Yeah, definitely. We have, from the audience, we have someone, Audrey, with their hand up. If you would like to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, my name is Audrey Davenport. I'm an Appalachian. I live in the Northeast Georgia mountains. I'm also an architect, right? So I want to point out to you, Evelyn, that the way that you directed your question to Lindsay and went past Sister Ahmad, right, is indicative of way architecture as a practice ignores indigenous people, the way that it is always trying to design for people that they don't actually understand, right? And here you have Mrs. Ahmad, who has firsthand experience, historical significance and relevance, who could answer any of those questions on a firsthand basis rather than from an architectural perspective. Oftentimes when I was a SCAD, they would discourage me from thinking that I was a social scientist, that I was just supposed to build for people that I didn't actually understand, right? And I find the information that Ms. Ahmad imparted to us basically firsthand experience to have answered any of the questions that you directed at Lindsay. And I just want to say that that is indicative of how this profession works. And it's unfortunate, in my opinion. But I'm just so proud that I was able to hear her story. I am president of the Regional African American Museum in Northeast Georgia. I am president of the Habersham Historical Society in Northeast Georgia. And this is, it's just amazing how it continues the same narrative over and over again. So that's what I want to say. I want to appreciate both of the speakers, and I got a lot from them both, but also want to show how the narrative is set up and continues to be perpetuated in that same sense over and over again. And rural America is often overlooked, and particularly African American, rural American communities, that they don't think we exist. And by and large, because we are rural, that we have the stereotype that's attached to us that, one, if we are here, like, how do we sustain ourselves, right? We don't actually always need outside influence so much as we also just need to be heard and acknowledged and worked with where we are. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay, if I might follow up on that, by the way, it's T, that's what I use, T. When we went out to bid, put out a RFQ, request for qualifications, I automatically went to NOMA, the National Organization of Minority Architects, because I know that there are many out there who are not brought into the fold. And I found that quite a few had studied preservation during heritage design. So for a heritage design in a rural community, it was like, bam, here's an opportunity that doesn't happen that often, and wow, you know. So that is especially, as I said, those that that major, here the academic again, those that major in art history as architectural designers. So the rural area and trying to save those buildings from being torn down is an automatic draw and pull for them. The young woman who we ended up hiring of Asian Filipino descent was so enthralled about it until she she emailed and called to get more. What's your website? Can I, so that she could get on top of that. And I'm very proud to say that the Ohio Business Magazine just gave her the Success Award. And you know why she received the Success Award? Because she went after small contracts. The one that we had was for $25,000. So when I started calling NOMA and said, look, we got this contract. Well, they heard $25,000. Okay. She came for it. So what she ended up doing was accepting small contracts throughout the state and was able to keep every one of her employees employed during the COVID crisis, which is why she won the Success Award from the Ohio Business Magazine. So rural and thinking small is well, it can be very thoughtful and quite attractive right now. And I think that it is. And I'm just so proud of Charissa winning that award and having the foresight to accept an 80-page report. We showed this report to one of our alums who is a premier civil engineer up in Las Vegas. And he said, "You all got this for $25,000? No way. This was a steal." And she even went beyond that to looking at the organ that we have in there and finding out and sending someone in to look at that organ because it was built in 1932 by such and such an organization that no longer exists. But I know this man who can look at it and see. And in her 80-page report said, once the organ is restored, we will put cement flooring under it because it's so heavy to make sure that it will last once it is restored. So those are the kinds of design features that we've received from some quality folk. And I'm just so happy to have them on board with us. And hopefully our capital campaign is going to really bring to fold the re-emergence of this, because even with Ohio University, I'm thinking we have a robust uptown of bars and places where the kids hang out, but I find that a lot of Black students, they're not beer drinkers for one thing. So where do they party? In their dorms. And that's another reason why this building has to be redone. We need to offer a space for them to also come and feel that they can hang out and enjoy. Not that we're going to serve them any liquor, because Mr. Berry was a teetotaler. Even at his hotel, he did not sell any liquor, even with President Harding and all of them. By the way, that hotel was the first is known for introducing a Bible to a hotel. And Mattie Berry put in sewing kits and other kinds of amenities. So it was, the saying was, meet you at the Berry, meet you at the Berry. And for them to have torn this down in 74 was just such a heartache. Right now, there's a very modern establishment that's there that looks like a coach or a bus. And it is known as Hangover Easy. That's what replaced the Berry Hotel. So we don't want the Mount Zion to be destroyed, especially with the incredible design features that has been culminated from all of the folk that the CERD brought together in their design sketch, and also for what the Hardlines has done in terms of interpreting that design into something that can really last and be a wonderful edifice in our town. The Heritage Square concept that we introduced to the city would encompass the place where the Berry Hotel was, moved down one block to the Armory, which was a World War I building, over to our building, which was built in 1906, and on up to another building, which is now the Southeast Heritage, the Southeast History Center. That would encompass the Heritage Square concept, which the city has adopted and put in their 2040 plan, because they know that it is a visitors' mecca along the Underground Railroad corridor. So we're very happy to have that kind of cooperation from our mayor and from our city. And we hope to move forward with this. And maybe as the business students have figured out, we'll be revenue generating by 2023.
Amazing. Yeah. T, thank you for sharing all of that. A lot of the every time we talk, a lot of the new partnerships come up, new connections that you're making. This is part of the Underground Railroad. This is part of our city's plan. This is part of what we're doing with the students. I love to see sort of the platform that Mount Zion has created for community engagement, actually bringing people together to talk not just about this one building, but also like what community means to them and what their vision for that could be. And if I had one other question to ask you, because I think a lot of our participants have been super generous with their time, maybe just to close us out, it would be about historical legacies. You were talking about the heartbreak of when the other Black-owned structures in Athens were torn down. And that was something I was thinking about earlier in the rural assemblies everywhere. This is called the Road to Repair. And some of the speakers earlier today were talking about healing. So I wanted to ask you about healing in Mount Zion and what you think something as simple as fixing an old church building can do for your community.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that last sentence. What did you say?
I said, what can something as simple as fixing an old church building do for your community healing?
Oh, for our community healing? Wow. Well, if you would know that what has already happened, the Athens County Foundation has developed what they call the Racial Equity Forum, and immediately 55 members joined the Equity Forum, and our mayor has been cited. I wish I'd read the article a little closer, but he's been chosen by some national organization as the racial equity representative for that. So we are already on our way in terms of healing, and I know I have not participated because I've been in grant writing bubble, but there is also something called the Art of Hosting that has been happening within the last month, which meets on every Friday, talking about how the dialogue can occur between the different groups within our community, especially now with the Asian American. By the way, I am wearing this from one of my Singaporean students in honor of my Asian fellow humans in this world. So I think that with the Mount Zion, and as it has always been, even for me as a faculty member in university, the students of color and from other nations somehow come to me. I'm not sure why. It maybe that is that melanin that exists in so many other, but the Asian students, the African students, the Filipino students, etc. The young lady that designed that marvelous logo, that she looked at this window and said, "Wow, this is it," is from the Philippines, and put that whole piece together for us. So I think that it'll be quite healing as a multicultural space. We're calling it a Black Cultural Center, but it will definitely be a multicultural space for the students, as you saw the business students who said, this is where we want to come and hang out. And once you see those marvelous buildings inside, one of the things that said was, this will be a place for weddings. There's no competition in Athens anywhere for a wedding that looks like this.
That's awesome. That's such an exciting future. And I thank you again for sharing it with everyone that's on the call.
Right back.
We'll be right back. I guess I think people are dropping off. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to let us know. I'll be joining some of the other Rural Assembly breakouts this week. And if you're ever in Green River, Utah, say hi to Lindsay, go see the labyrinth next to that building. I'll give Tia a moment to come back in case she had something in mind. I always love to see what's up her sleeve. So everyone commenting, Lisa, Frankie, thank you guys so much for your engagement and attention. Ready, any closing remarks from anyone, or any closing questions? All right, well, this has been an awesome session. Totally appreciate it. And hope to talk with you soon. You're on mute. All right, I think you're muted.
I've been to Utah and had conferences in Utah. The next time I come, I'm coming to Green River. I'm gonna look.
Hey, come on. Listen, I could listen to your stories all day. So I think that you should come down and just tell us some stories. That's wonderful.
right. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you all.